I'm honestly really excited for this video. Let's address and debunk 4 major myths and misconceptions when it comes to Muslim women. Myth number 1 is that Islam instructs men to beat their women. Many point to verse 34 in Surah An-Nisa. Men are the caretakers of women, as men have been provisioned by Allah over women and tasked with supporting them financially. And righteous women are devoutly obedient and when alone, protective of what Allah has entrusted them with. And if you sense ill conduct from your women, advise them first. If they persist, do not share their beds, but if they still persist, then discipline them gently. But if they change their ways, do not be unjust to them. Surely Allah is Most High, All Great. Does this verse justify domestic violence? No, and there are 4 major reasons why. Firstly is that the Quran is always to be understood based on the teachings and the life of the Prophet ﷺ. That is our context. Interpretation of the Quran is not left to people's whims and desires. Secondly, Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu, the Prophet ﷺ's cousin and a foremost commentator on the Quran, explained the last resort of this verse to be a symbolic gesture and not a call for physical violence. Thirdly, Ata ibn Abi Rabah, the student of Ibn Abbas and a famous early Meccan jurist, understood this and therefore said about this verse, a man does not hit his wife, he simply expresses that he's upset with her. Fourthly, historical court records show that Muslim judges routinely ruled that husbands causing physical harm to their wives must be punished. Quranic verses like these cannot be interpreted in isolation, ignoring the fundamentals of Islam that are established in other verses in the Quran and the life of the Prophet ﷺ. Islam affirms that marriage must be based on love and mercy. Islam unequivocally condemns all forms of cruelty and abuse. Domestic violence is explicitly condemned in Islam. This can be clearly seen when the Prophet ﷺ says, do not hit the female servants of God. And he also says, do not hit women and do not revile women. The Prophet ﷺ also never abused his wives in any form. Aisha radiallahu anha narrates, he never once hit a servant, a woman, nor struck anything with his hand. He ﷺ also said to a group, how could any of you strike his wife like he strikes a stallion camel and then hope to embrace her? Thus, the stereotype myth that Islam instructs men to beat women is debunked, invalid. No. Myth number 2 is that a Muslim woman's testimony is worth only half of that of a man's. Many point to verse 282 in Surah Al-Baqarah. It's a long paragraph of a verse, but I'm just going to be reading the relevant parts. O believers, when you contract a loan for a fixed period of time, commit it to writing. ... Call upon 2 of your men to witness. If 2 men cannot be found, then 1 man and 2 women of your choice will witness. So if one of the women forgets, the other may remind her. Does this verse imply that women are inherently less reliable than men? No. There are 2 main reasons for this. Firstly is that women were heavily involved in riwayah or hadith narrations. A hadith are narrations of the Prophet ﷺ's actions or words and a second major source of Islamic law after the Quran. Male and female narrations were equally reliable based only on integrity and reliable memory. Narrations required the greatest care and the need for reliability in testimonies. Aisha radiallahu anha, the wife of the Prophet ﷺ, was among the top 5 narrators of the hadith. Secondly, reliability was based on experience, not gender. In the socio-cultural context of the time, men were more involved in the public realm, so political and socioeconomic spheres, and women were more involved in the private realms or domestic spheres. And so female testimony was deemed more superior in areas where women were more involved. Some scholars determined that the substitution of 2 women for a man was only intended to be applied to some areas of law and not even in all financial matters. Muawiyah, caliphate of his time, once passed judgments on housing based on the sole testimony of Salama. Salama was the 6th wife of the Prophet ﷺ and one of the most influential female companions of the Prophet ﷺ. It is also said in Tafsir al-Manar or Manar, it is from the nature of the human being, Tab' al-Bashar, whether male or female, that their memory will be stronger for matters that are of importance to them and with which they are more abundantly involved. Another saying by a scholar, Ibn al-Qayyim, says, and there's no doubt that the strength of evidence from the testimony of righteous women like Darda or Atiyah is stronger than the strength of the testimony from any ordinary man. And so no, Islam does not consider the testimony of a woman inherently less reliable than that of a man. Myth number 3 out of 4 is that Islamic inheritance law favors men over women. Many point to verse 11 in Surah An-Nisa, which is also a long one, so I'll only read the relevant part. Allah commands you regarding your children, the share of the male will be twice that of the female. If you leave only 2 or more females, their share is 2/3 of the estate, but if there's only 1 female, her share will be 1/2. Does this verse mean that men will always receive more than women? No. Islamic inheritance law is based on a more complex, larger system of Islamic finance grounded in financial responsibility. So this part might actually surprise you if you're not knowledgeable on this or if you do believe this stereotype, but out of 30 situations, women only inherit less than men in 4 of those situations. 4. Women inherit equal to men in 10 of those situations, and women inherit more than men in 16 of the situations. Meaning in 26 out of those 30 situations, women inherit the same or more than men. All instances where there is a discrepancy between male and female heirs is due to 2 things: difference in proximity or the rank of relationship to the deceased, or based on responsibility to provide for one another financially. Islamic law also has the capacity to account for unique financial circumstances through the concept of wasiyya, or bequest. The objective of the distribution of wealth is to equalize all the recipients among the family of the deceased and to treat women with justice and dignity. And fun fact, Islam is actually the first religion to assign inheritance to a woman, and her share is based on responsibility and not her gender. Myth number 4, and the final one, is that Islam calls men to oppress women through polygamy. Many point to verse 34 in Surah Nisa that goes, "If you fear you might fail to give orphan women their due rights if you were to marry them, then marry other women of your choice, 2, 3, or 4. But if you are afraid you will fail to maintain justice, then content yourselves with one or those bondwomen in your possession. This way you are less likely to commit injustice." So does this verse call for polygamy? Polygamy, or more accurately polygyny, is a practice that predates Islam and was prevalent in pre-Islamic Arabia. This verse didn't establish nor encourage polygyny. If anything, it came and it restricted it to encourage the fair treatment of women. Aisha radiallahu anha said it was the custom of Arabs who had under their custody beautiful and rich orphan girls to marry them without offering their fair dower. And so this verse in Surah Nisa was revealed, came down, and ensured the protection of the orphans that were at risk of abuse by their male guardians by terminating the practice of taking advantage of orphans. This verse also stipulates that multiple wives must be treated fairly. And verse 129, also in Surah Nisa, shows that men can never be perfectly fair. Meaning, if the wives cannot be naturally treated fairly, the Quran is indirectly stating that monogamy is preferred. Islam placed restrictions on polygamy to ensure the justice of women. FYI, women are also allowed to write down monogamy or stipulate monogamy in their marriage contract. So the objectives of this verse are clear: to ensure fairness and protection for women, and to regulate the already established practices of polygamy by restricting it and removing potential avenues of abuse and equating it with noble goals and added responsibility for the man. And so in my own words, if you want to be with a woman, you cannot just be with her, you have to be responsible for her, provide for her, care for her. And so if the above intent is not met, then polygyny is either discouraged or forbidden completely. I also want to note that polygamy is not exclusive to Islam, nor even a predominantly Muslim thing. In India, for example, there are more groups of people that are Hindu and Adivasis that are in polygamous relationships than those of Muslims. Polygamy is also legalized in predominantly Christian states: Uganda, Zambia, Central African Republic, and the Republic of Congo. Would you also like to know the number of polyamorous relationships in the US in 2014? 9.8 million. And so Islam did not come and introduce or establish polygamy. It was already a thing. It came, it restricted it with noble goals and added responsibility and regulations to ensure fair treatment. Basically saying, if you're going to do it, might as well do it fairly. Those were the 4 major myths in Islam debunked.